Rise of Hawk, Part 2, Scene 15. The Church of the Founder. Nalana rather liked Father Owen. He was emotionally quiet, friendly to everyone, and loving with the orphanage kids. She sensed there was more to him than she saw, but she couldn't believe for a second that whatever was hidden under that calm blanket inside was anything but good. "I have a name you can use in class." He handed her an old, wrinkled birth certificate for a woman her age. The name on the form was Gabriella Sol. She wasn't a Gabriella, not really, but she was happy to pretend if it meant that she could learn to be a proper nurse and not just a walking, talking painkiller. "But please keep your involvement," he paused as a fellow priest walked close by, "in things best kept secret, a secret. I have vouched for you, and if I screw up, you'll get into trouble." She finished a sentence for him. "I totally understand. I'm pretty good with secrets." She looked away for a moment. "Well, most of the time. But I promise to be good with this one." When she looked back up into his face, he was smiling, and again she sensed that quiet amusement in him that she had triggered a number of times that morning. She wished for a moment that she was a telepath so she could find out why she seemed to amuse him so much, and either increase that behaviour or stop it altogether. They walked through a door and out into the main cathedral area. Lines of pews filled up much of the huge empty space, and carvings of the 12 church patrons, and 12 months of the year, stood around the edges of the room at regular intervals. Across the length of the vaulted sanctuary, Nalana sensed a terrible agony. She stopped and stared at the main entrance. "What's wrong?" he asked. I don't know," she frowned. "Someone's hurting really bad." As she frowned at them, the double doors opened, and a dark-haired woman stumbled in. Despite the distance, Nalana knew immediately that the woman was shot and dying. She took a step forward, intent on helping, but Father Owen moved to stand in front of her. "No," he whispered. "That's an agent. Go to my office and stay there until I come for you." She looked up at him. "But—" Blue eyes were firm. "No, you need to keep hidden. There are plenty of people here to help her. Just go." Nalana only paused for a moment before she turned to do as he asked. She skidded out of sight back through the door and into the hallways behind the sanctuary. She knew it was important that no rebel or free sire were caught in the cathedral. If caught, it wouldn't just be her in trouble. Father Owen, the other priests, and lovely old Father Andrew would all be arrested and executed for harbouring fugitives. She couldn't do that to them, not ever. Father Owen's office was next to a U-turn in the main hallway. Pushing the door, she stepped inside. His office was very sparse, but fairly large. In the middle stood a broad wooden desk and a turn-of-the-century-style leather chair. In one corner to the right of the door was a bookcase that towered over the room. It was filled from floor to ceiling with ancient books, manuscripts and scrolls, many of which had symbols on them that she did not recognize. She walked from the doorway towards those beautiful books and ran her fingers over their aged leather spines. Her mother had been fluent in ancient, so whenever she saw such books they reminded Nala of her. One brown leather spine had many letters she couldn't read, but she recognized one symbol, the ancient letter for Za. She touched it with her fingers. The edge of a smile lifted her lips. "You really like my books, don't you?" There was a grin in his voice. She laughed and turned to face him in the doorway. "Yes, very much. I wish I could read them all, but I can barely read and write in common." "We can look into that later, if you like, but for now, I think it would be best if you leave. You shouldn't be here when the agents arrive. Andrew will do the rest of your papers and finalize your enrollment for you." Nalana lifted her fingers from the beautiful book spines inside. "Okay." They zigzagged through the stone hallways, but it was a different path to the one she knew. All of a sudden, she was in a long kitchen made of clean, shiny metal. There was a back door, and he opened it for her. "I hope you don't mind," he smiled, putting a nice sparkle in the bright blue of his eyes. "The agency will arrive through the front, so I figured that the back door is a better escape for you." Nalana bowed formally. "Thank you, Father." "Until next time, Alashana." She blushed, recognising the ancient title for Master Healer, and tried very hard not to giggle at his compliment as Jenna had the day before. Scene 16. Talon strode in through the double-door entrance of the cathedral. The rage in him was so deep he almost didn't recognise Father Andrew when the old man approached him. "Talon, you must leave the cathedral." "No, not without that assassin," he snarled. "Tay." The old man grabbed him weakly by the elbows. "You have to go. The agency is coming. Please, just leave." He shook off Andrew's grip and glared down at the old man. "Where is he?" Father Andrew pulled back from him in fear. "Talon Khan." A new voice, much younger than Father Andrew, echoed across the pews. "Leave this place." Talon walked around the old man and approached the new person. He seemed more confident than any priest his age should be. The man couldn't even be 25. "Give me the girl and I'll go." "Father Owen, be careful." The new priest lifted a hand to stop Andrew finishing his sentence. Then the man glanced back at Talon. His eyes were ice blue, and Tay sensed something very strong behind them, like an unyielding wall. "Talon, whatever this girl has done to the rebels will be nothing in comparison to what you will bring to this monastery if you stay. I am asking you calmly and quietly to leave." Tay lifted his chin and regripped the handgun. "Or what?" The priest moved into his personal space with blinding speed, disarming him and then knocking his knees out from under him. Suddenly, Talon found himself on the stone floor, looking up at the priest over the barrel of his own weapon. Ice blue eyes glared down at him. "I said leave. Now." The coldness in the priest's eyes was oddly terrifying to Talon. He'd seen it before, but he wasn't quite sure where. The man standing over him clicked the safety and stepped back. Tay got to his feet again as he stared at the priest. Behind him, footsteps came in through the entrance and stopped abruptly. "Tay?" Nama's voice was afraid. Outside, the sound of agency sirens drew near. "You hear those sirens?" the younger priest growled as he handed Tay's gun back to him. "If you two aren't out of here by the time they arrive, you will shut down this monastery and kill a lot of innocent people." His voice lowered menacingly. "Get out." Scene break. Nalana was good at being invisible. She learned how to do it at the Ace of Spades casino. She would whip in and out between rich customers, pickpocketing gambling chips and cash, or collecting the stray coins that sometimes bounced out of sight when the slot machines spat out large numbers of quarters. She and her mother had done pretty nicely from what she'd been able to steal and find, all without Fritz ever finding out that they were earning more than the allotted wage of a debt-bound slave and her debt-bound child. By the age of 15, Alana's ability to blend into a crowd and become invisible had become instinctual. So, when she came around to the front of the cathedral to discover all of the agency vehicles and lights, she managed quite well to meld into the crowd. Anyone who saw her would think she was just some poor shoeless street urchin, made curious by all the pretty shiny lights and straight-laced blue suits. She knew where the security camera was in front of the cathedral, and knew which angle to stand or walk on so that it didn't see her face without looking like she was deliberately avoiding it. A small crowd had formed in front of the cathedral entrance. A white and blue agency ambulance sat on the cobbled square near the front doors, and a couple of blue suit agency patrol vehicles were parked either side of it, pushed between two tall sightseers who conveniently blocked the camera from seeing her. She watched the agency EMTs bring out the woman who had been shot. As the stretcher passed her, Nalana sensed that the unknown woman had been given a number of painkillers and was somewhat less close to death than she had been when she came into the cathedral. The stretcher was lifted into the ambulance, and the back doors slammed closed. Flashing blue lights fired up with the motor, and crossing the cobbles of Cathedral Square, the ambulance drove back into the main street and out in an easterly direction towards the agency tower building. The crowd started to disperse, and she was about to make her way safely out of camera range to head home when 2 blue suits came out of the cathedral dragging a third person in handcuffs. When the handcuffed man looked up at the crowd, she had to fight a reaction of horror and fear, lest someone noticed that she knew him. Father Owen's face was red on one side, and she figured that one of the arresting officers must have hit him. They'd taken his priest collar and overgarment, so he looked more like an ordinary man in black clothing than a priest. As they passed her in the crowd, Father Owen saw her for a microsecond, and for a microsecond they locked eyes. He wasn't afraid, but she sensed that he wanted her to keep quiet, to run and hide, not to risk herself. As she watched, he was pushed roughly onto the back of one of the agency cars, and a few minutes later, they drove away after the ambulance. Scene 17. What do you think you were doing, Tay? That was such a mistake. Glaring at his friend, Talon dislodged his elbow from Nama's grip. She killed the twins, the others. It's here as Cell. She would have killed little Tim if we hadn't interrupted her, and she nearly killed Usher. What the nooth am I supposed to do? Just sit there and let her kill more of us? How exactly is bringing Father Andrew and the monastery down to the gutter stopping her? I didn't want that. He sighed and shook his head. I didn't think. No, you didn't think at all. Nama smacked the back of Tay's head roughly. Don't you think I want that girl dead too? But mindless vengeance is not a smart way of going about it, especially at that cost. Those priests are the only legal friends the rebels have. I know. I'm sorry. Talon stopped walking and turned to look behind them. He could feel fear and a pain sensation that implored desperately for them to stop and wait. He frowned. What? Nama asked. Not sure. Someone's following us. He saw a figure step into the narrow lane between buildings and run towards them. Nalana? He called. Tay, Nama, Father Owen, he got took. When she got to them, she practically fell over herself, but Tay caught and steadied her. What? Nala, start from the beginning. What's happened? I was at the cathedral, she panted. Father Owen arranged a fake ID so I can go to school and learn to be a nurse. Some lady came in. She was shot, and Father Owen told me to hide. Then when it was clear, he took me out the back door, 'cause agents were coming. When I got onto the street again, there were blue suits everywhere. I don't know why, but they arrested him. The agency is Father Owen. They're going to kill him. The breath in his lungs left Talon, and he stared at her in utter shock. Haida, I told you, Tay. Nama turned and kicked the alley wall. Mara Sothenda Chena. Realizing what that meant, Tay looked sideways at Nama. But, yes, Nama interrupted him. Father Owen knows where we live. He knows the faces of many rebels. Tay swore. They'll take what he knows, and then they'll come after us. Who cares about what he knows? The rebels can just run. Nalana was crying. A nice, loving, innocent man is going to be killed, and all you can think of is how it'll affect you. Brushing at her tears with one hand, she ran away from them. Nama sighed. She's right, you know, and it's our fault. What can we do? Nama brushed one hand through his dark hair. Well, unless they've changed their procedures since Carl and I got out, they'll take him to Gora prison first. If he survives until tomorrow, he'll be transferred to the tower and the interrogators. Are you suggesting we break into a prison to rescue him? Nama lifted an eyebrow. See any other choice? But aren't prisons secure? You know, hard to break out of, let alone into? Generally, but Gora prison was my first posting. I think I can do it. The place is mostly abandoned now anyway. We just need some gear and a unified plan. Nama flicked his head. Come on, let's get back home. We've got to initiate an evac, and we might just have time to apologise to Nalana as well. Scene break. Agent Rasa pulled his prisoner down the long entry corridor of Gora prison. The place had seen better days, with peeling paint, water damage all over, and rats skittering away from their footsteps. The building was certainly not up to code. However, the quality of the facilities didn't matter much because the prison served only as a temporary holding cell. They didn't need to smarten the place up in line with basic sentient rights, because tomorrow the prisoner would be transferred to telepath interrogators to be stripped of all useful information and die of extreme psychic shock. Walking dead, Rasa thought cynically. They're all walking dead if they come in here. The prisoner had remained silent the entire drive there, which was unusual. They often begged for mercy or denied whatever charge they were given. He also didn't seem particularly frightened. Tense, maybe, but not scared. What kind of man trades his life for that of an old man, and yet is not frightened of torture or death? They got to the end of the hall, where a metal grating protected the front of the guard control room. Rasa nodded to the uniformed man inside, and a door in front of them unlocked. He pulled it open and stepped into the one area of the old prison still in use. That section had once been solitary confinement. There were 5 sealed metal cells with no internal windows and no furniture inside other than a chair. In its heyday, it must have been a truly unpleasant place to stay, but it all looked a bit rotten and muted now. They walked to the end in the last cell, which was psi-shielded. Unlocking the middle bar, he guided the man inside to a chair in the middle of the darkness. This was usually the time he was accustomed to the need of hitting a prisoner to stop their cowardly begging and weeping. It was strange not to have to do so. He tied the man to the chair, and frowning, Rasa went to stand in the light from the door. He looked down at the younger man with a deliberately hostile expression on his face. "I am Agent Rasa. What is your name?" "Code in A0.4.0177. Access 101826. The man's voice was very calm. Ice blue eyes looked firmly up at him, and Rasa sensed empathically that this man would be difficult to break. "That's very nice. You know the code-in sequence of some dead A0 agent, but that's not what I asked for." Gripping his fist tight, he backhanded the young man hard across his broken cheekbone. "What is your name?" The pain was obvious in his face, but his voice remained calm and clear. "You do not have clearance to know who—" Rasa hit him again, causing the man's lip to bleed. "What is your name?" His answering voice was quieter, but no less defiant. "Code in A0.4.0177. Access 101826. The agent lifted his handgun out from under his jacket and, leaning over him threateningly, put the barrel in the man's face. "You will tell me what I want to hear."